Welcome to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
So welcome into Grind to Growth to Greatness. I have been looking forward to this guest for a long time. Julie Bill McKelvey is her name. Her story is vast. It's long. It's exciting. It's heart-wrenching. It's just all kinds of good. And I've been looking forward to this for a long time. But Julie is a mom. She is a business owner, actually a recently retired business owner. She is a mother. She's a mountaineer, and she does all kinds of interesting things in her life. She's always traveling. She's a great family person. I see her with her kids all the time, but she is a wife to Bobby. She's got 2 kids, Jacob and Jackson, and it's a great story. So I've been looking forward to this story for a long time. But Julie, I met her about 6 months ago. I was sitting getting my hair cut, and the lady doing my haircut, I was telling her about my podcast, and she said, "You ought to listen to the lady next door here that's sitting in the seat next to you." And so I started to tune in, and here Julie McKelvey is one of less than 100 women to summit the top 7 summits in the world. So if that is something that you don't understand, Everest is in there along with a bunch of others. So we're going to talk to her about her journey, how she got ready, how she even decided to do something like that. And I hope you love this story as much as I do. I think you're going to get a lot from it. And she's going to share her heart and the way she got from A to B. So we're excited. Welcome to season 2. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, so exciting. So Julie, one of the things I asked, tell me about your family. Tell me where you grew up. Tell me about mom and dad. A little bit about where life started for Julie.
Born in Parkersburg, West Virginia. So hold off on the West Virginia jokes, please. And lived there with my mom, my dad, my 2 brothers. And when I was 2, my dad, and we were kind of hard off and not a lot of money. And so my dad was really good at sales, and he answered an ad in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for hearing aid sales. And so he moved out here first, and he figured out, okay, I can make a go of this thing. And so then we moved shortly after, and I grew up in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, and went to school, and, great childhood, hardworking parents. And my dad's founded Miracle Ear. So the very first franchise agreement that was ever signed was him. And so it was a huge part of my life, hearing aids. My mom was a secretary, and they worked all the time. When we were sick from school, we would sleep on the floor of the office kind of thing. And my brother was involved, and I just swore at that as early as I can remember that no matter what, I will never have anything to do with the family business, which
So I didn't know that. So your dad actually founded the Miracle Ear franchise then here in this area?
He was the first franchisee in the whole country. So the founder, Ken Dahlberg, came to him and said, "I have this idea for a small hearing aid. I want to call it a Miracle Ear. I want to franchise it. Will you, risk everything and sign on it?" And he did.
Wow.
And yeah. So, and then my parents got divorced, and there was, the typical thing with divorce, and, some ugliness in there, obviously.
Sure.
And so my mom was raising 3 kids on her own, and with not a lot of support, and started her own hearing aid business, and worked all the time. And at the same time went to school to get her master's degree. And I look back on that saying, I have such a soft spot in my heart for single moms, because I saw mom did grow, raising us. Went to high school, was involved. I was never involved in sports, really. I dabbled in basketball, but in a little field hockey here and there, but it really wasn't my thing. Went to IUP.
Okay.
Barely got into that college. It was the only college that actually accepted me.
Okay.
Because of a pretty difficult time in my life that I was in.
Okay.
It was on a very wrong path. And anyway, so I get accepted to IUP. I go there and graduate on the 5-year plan,
Okay.
and remember very little of it, sadly.
Mm.
Had some pretty difficult experiences there because of alcohol and drugs, and just get mixed up with the wrong people. And I went to school for communications and journalism, though, and I got a job with Channel 27 News, and ran the cameras, ran the soundboard for the news, and that was going to be my life. And I was hoping to get into journalism or get behind the camera or get on the camera at some point. And someone told me, I don't remember who it was at HTM, said if you want to make any money in broadcasting, you got to get into sales first. And so then I went to radio sales and started selling ads and loved it and was pretty good at it. And, the plan was to go on to television, back to television at some point. And then my dad came to me in 1993 and said, and he and I had been estranged for about 10 years because
okay.
Yeah.
I
So
did not know that.
went to a convention a Miracle convention in Hawaii, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And he said no. He's like, you just got to the place where you went to school for, and you're in the field. Like, why? And I pushed because I don't accept no easily.
Obviously.
I started out knocking on doors. He said, all right, I'll give you a job, but you get no office, no leads. You'll go knock on doors in Millersburg up in Upper Dauphin County, and for free hearing test to seniors. And I did that, and I was good at it, and just kind of started working my way up through the company. Never thought in a million years I would manage or own it or any of that. And I figured out along the way, and my dad figured out, okay, I'm pretty good at building and managing a sales team. And then I bought the company from him in 2003. So
how about that? Now, side note to that. Now, you said mom was in the hearing aid industry as well. Did mom ever make a transfer into Miracle Ear? Did she have her own thing, or how did that go?
No, she's when they got divorced, she stole all of his customers and opened up right down the street in Camp.
Oh my goodness!
So I'm like, go mom,
Oh wow.
And so she was independent, and she never advertised or anything, very small. And so I chose to go with my dad because when I do something, I do it big, and I wanted to manage people. So
yeah. So period of time, kind of reverse back to high school. You started to get into some things maybe that weren't so good for you. And I think a lot of teens find themselves there in this world. It's kind of a fact of life. It's sad in every case because we have to learn our way. We have to make our own mistakes. We have to get around our own hurdles, those things. But you go back, you struggle with some of those things, those addiction kind of things. You go into college, you make it through. It was kind of a tough time. When did you see that part of your life? When did you wake up to the fact that, man, I need to change something, or I'm going to die, or I'm going to kill somebody else, or I'm just, it's going to be a bad thing for me. What was your mindset when you got out of college, and where were you in your addiction struggle?
Well, the day that that everything changed for me was June 12th, 1995, which is my sobriety date. So I just celebrated 29 years sober, and it's a huge part of my life. And
it's awesome.
But in high school, I was just partying like everybody else, and and as it turns out, you surround yourself with people who are behaving the same way, so that it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal.
Sure.
And then got into college, and just went off the rails once away from home, and started to get into drugs pretty heavily. And but no matter how bad the consequences were, it wasn't enough to get me to stop. I would just justify and pivot and find a way around or whatever. DUIs and tickets, and somehow still managed to graduate. And the difference between me and everybody else is we'd be partying, and then at some point everybody goes home for the night, and I go home, but I stay up all night partying by myself. And then I'm out of college, and I'm working, and I can't show up for work, and I can't make it through a day, and I keep saying to myself, I'm just gonna will myself through this. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to use drugs for, however many days or weeks or whatever commitment. And I meant it when I said that.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
really could stop on my own, and I could not. And so nothing spectacular happened. On my sobriety date, I came to like any other day, and I had locked myself in my apartment for 2 weeks at that point, and wasn't answering the balconies all piled up with trash. I'm late on all my bills. I'm ruining my relationships. Nobody can count on me. I'm unemployable basically. And I came to, and I just couldn't do it another day of waking up and lying and cheating and stealing my way through. How am I going to get more? And I wasn't too far from being on the streets. I'm pretty convinced of that.
Well, tell me a little bit. I think there's a lot of people, and I subscribe to some channels that talk about people with addiction and their stories and how they either come out or they're still in it or what have you. Was there a catalyst or a conversation, or was it just the self-awareness that I'm living like this is like this as we're looking around? I can't do that anymore. What did your mom and dad have any kind of effect on you, or were they always, hey, you need to shape up, you need to whatever? But was there a catalyst there for you that when you woke up on that day that said, I need to be done?
You have these visions, and again, it's a way for me to justify continuing to do it. That's not me. Like I can stop where I want to, and
there's always somebody a little lower.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And my dad said to me at one point, if you want to find out if you're an alcoholic, stop for 30 days, and then at the 30-day point, moderate. And I was like, I totally can do this. And I made it to day 29, and then I got so drunk and wasted and wrecked my car and slept with my girlfriend's boyfriend and just drink. But in my mind, I was like, I did it. So I forgot the moderate part. And the thing with alcoholics is we don't know how to moderate. And the truth is, not really interested in moderating. It's all or nothing. It's either, one is too much and 100 is not enough kind of things.
Right. Yeah. So that day came along and you said, I have to be done. What exactly did you do to be done? Was it sheer will? What was the trigger that helped you get over?
I realized, because this was shortly after I did this 30-day experiment and failed. So in the back of my mind, I was like, oh man, this is like not good. Like maybe I can't stop. And then when I came to, I cried out to God, and I was not religious, spiritual, anything at that point. So God helped me. And I called my mom and went over to her house, or she came and got me. I don't even remember. And I was working for my dad at the time. He had no idea how bad it had gotten because I wasn't around him.
Yeah.
And they called a rehab and found a bed. And so the next day I was on my way. And of course that day I wake up and I'm like, I think I just over exaggerated this whole thing. But my dad said, I'll hold this job for you for 30 days and I won't let out in the company what's going on. And so he did. I mean, he really saved my life. And I got there and I thought, okay, I'm a drug addict, but I'm not an alcoholic. And then through the process of what happens in rehab, I realized that, for me, it's both, and it's complete abstinence, and I can never have a drink or a drug again. And that's pretty difficult when you're 27 and you think your whole life's ahead of you, and it doesn't involve all the things that it had to that point. And I have to change my friends and my situation and all this stuff. And so, Yeah, that's pretty stunning. I mean, we have some addiction issues in our family as well, and it's either or. You either stop or you don't. And so I hear that. I've heard that story before, and thankfully, they've done okay coming out, and they seem to be on the right path. But you mentioned something, telling me that you mentioned that you cried out to God and you weren't religious. Tell me why you did that. Was that something that did you grow up in a family that had a relationship with God, or did you have friends that had a relationship with God, or was that
something internal that said, I need to reach out to.
It was internal. I mean, my mom, I remember going to church. I was baptized. I was confirmed. And the only thing I really remembered about church was that I felt better when I walked out than when I walked in.
Yeah.
And that all went out the window once I started drinking and using. And
sure.
And so my prayers were foxhole prayers. I mean, get me out of this, and I promise I'll, fill in the blank. But I knew that morning that I came to, I knew that I couldn't stop on my own, and I knew that I was going to die. I mean, there was no question the rate that I was going and the amount of drugs and alcohol that I was ingesting. I mean, I just wouldn't have survived very long. And so I just cried out to God, help me. And then all of a sudden I picked up the phone and, I'm calling my mom and then the next year I had like 24 hours in between when I, had called for my parents and when I was able to get into rehab. And that 24-hour time span was the only time in 5 years that I could not reach my drug dealer. Wow. And I really believe that was divinely inspired. I think if I had reached him, I wouldn't be here right now.
That sounds like you heard your prayers for sure. I'm a faithful guy, and I believe God hears our prayers and does things like that. And it's an amazing moment in your story, quite frankly. So you go to rehab, you spend 30 days in rehab, you come out, you go back to your job, or what did you do?
Yeah. I went back to my job and changed everything in my life,
Wow.
And incredibly difficult for a really long time. I struggled until I got connected with the right people and was, willing to do things that I was convinced wouldn't work.
Right.
Convinced were only for you. And I didn't really, I'm a little different. I'm unique. I'm not unique. We're all the same. So I started following the directions and made recovery a part of my life, and it still is today. And no one's immune from relapse or it happening again or any of that. And I wouldn't be here, but B, I wouldn't have the life that I have. I mean, someone like me, where I came from, is not supposed to have done all the. I still wake up every day and say, I don't thank you, God, because I didn't do it. I went along with the plan, and I said yes when I was scared, and I was willing to take all the risks because I've already been at rock bottom. Like, I've already been all the way down. So why not say yes and try different things and work through the fear and and see what happens, and it keeps working out.
That's incredible. I want people to hear this, though. I really do. I want them to hear what you said. You said that everyone's the same. And I know what you mean by that. I think everyone's susceptible to those types of addictions. If you get in the wrong situation, they're susceptible to the addictions, but they also everybody's got to do the same thing to overcome them. Nobody's special. Nobody's different. It is about the steps of how to overcome. And I like that. I like the fact that you recognize that. And even in your struggle, I'm not the same. It's not about me. I can overcome this. And then you can't. We're all the same in that regard. And I think that's an interesting part of your story. So you get to the point where you start in your walk, let's call it your walk, your daily life. You implement some things in your life that help you overcome and help you daily conquer. Because as addiction, I understand that it's a daily struggle, I guess, not from experience, but from what I see and I hear and I read. So you implement these things in your life, and where does that put you in your business? How does your business progress? And then tell me, at what point does your desire or your direction for mountain climbing come into play?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's amazing when you start showing up for work and you're sober, how it's like, wow, It's like real quick, things got better with that.
Yeah.
So, I was still selling. I was in an office at that point, and then went into management and went into ownership. And my dad and I were still together, doing it together at that point.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
he was doing this extreme stuff. We do this crazy stuff, and
We're all in, no matter what it is, right?
yeah. So I would watch him over the years, like what? Like he did this Marathon des Sables, which is this 150-mile race through the Gobi Desert.
I've heard of that.
He did Kilimanjaro. He did Elbrus, and I never paid much attention to it, other than I've dad's off in some other country doing something again.
Yeah.
He came to me in 2016. I had him over for dinner, and he said, I think I have one more mountain left in me. I want you to do it with me. And I looked at him like, I'm not athletic. I mean, I'm sober at this point, but I'm not exercising. I'm not,
Yeah.
Knew nothing about mountain climbing. And I just said, yeah. And
that was my question. That was the question for me, is how you got from I'm not athletic or I'm a business person to I'm going to go climb this mountain.
Yeah.
Like, you just decided to say yes because it was dad?
Yes, that was the reason.
That was the reason.
I knew whatever he said, we're going to Japan and we'll climb Mount Fuji. And I had no idea what it either. It's the highest point in Japan.
Yeah.
And he said, you can totally do it. And I knew that I knew I would have an incredible experience with my dad outside of work. And we hadn't really had that. I mean, we lost touch for so long, then we get back together and it's all about work. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, and then my son Jacob was 12 at the time. And so he said yes. And he had even less of an idea than I did what that meant. And we started training, and I mean, he barely trained. I didn't train that much. I just went up to Round Top and walked up and down the hills.
Yeah.
And then we went to Japan. Like,
wow. So Jacob went on that trip with you?
Yes, he did.
Holy cow. That's something else.
As a 12. Yeah. We started up with my dad, and he was having major balance issues. So the guide was going back to check on him and, having the hard conversation with him, like, look, this is going to get a lot more difficult. And so dad went down, he waited at this little hut somewhere. He waited for Jacob and I, and Jacob and the guide and I went up, and you stay at this hut at, I don't even know what the elevation is, but it's above the clouds, and you're sleeping in there, and the guide comes and gets you at, 4 a.m. and get all your summit stuff together. And he's like, come here, come outside. And I saw the sunrise above the clouds for the first time, and brought Jacob out. And something in me changed. It was so spiritual, so emotional, so I was disconnected from my life for the first time ever. I had no internet, no contact with anybody. It was just me and Jacob up there, and encouraging him and watching him push through the struggle. And, then we summit, and he was super sick, and he had some altitude sickness, and, but we celebrated on the summit, and then we come down, and there's my dad waiting for us. And I knew I needed to do it again. I just knew it. I was in love with that process. And my dad had done Kilimanjaro. So I was like, well, Kilimanjaro's next. And so I got home and started Googling Kilimanjaro, knew nothing about it, found this guy, Ben, who changed the trajectory of my life completely. And got some girlfriends together and said, okay, let's go do Kilimanjaro. If we don't summit, we'll have a fun experience and see another country. And I never heard of the 7 summits at that point. So we go over and you stay, you're camping as you go up to the different camps towards the summit. And one night Ben said, we're having dinner in the dinner tent, and he says, you should think about the 7 summits. And I'm like,
oh goodness,
what is that? He goes, well, you're on one. He said it's the highest peak on each continent in the world, and you could totally do it. And I was like, I don't even know if we had summited yet at that point. So the whole time in my head, I'm, well, whatever it is, I'm going to do it.
This episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness is brought to you by Terry Barr, Distinctive Real Estate, advising families across Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia for over 15 years. Visit the website at terrybarrealestate.com.
Oh, geez.
I get home and Google 7 summits, and this company climbing the 7 summits pops up. They specialize in the logistics and helping people coordinate, all the things around the different countries that you have to go to and the visas that you have to get and all the things. And this guy, Mike Hamill, who owns that company, worked with me the whole time on what do I need to do? Who do I need to get to train me? What kind of gear? Who do I go to for the gear? Who do I go, which ones do I do in what order? Because I don't have a clue. I mean, my personality is, I'll just go do Everest first.
One after the other. Well, let me back up a little bit just before you get going too far. But I want to go back to Mount Fuji. I want just a little bit. You summit Mount Fuji and you get to the top of that. And you said something happened to you as a very spiritual experience. I guess I want to know a little bit about what your thoughts were. Was it more than you thought it would be? Was it less than you thought it would be? Was it exactly the way you thought it would be? Or was it just something so far out of what you had in your life that you just couldn't take it all in? I want to know what that moment felt like a little more.
The big moment for me was the waking up above the clouds and going out and seeing the sunrise. And then the rest of the time I was really worried about Jacob. He was not feeling good. I was like trying to figure out, do we turn around? Do we not? How far do I push him? I don't even know what this thing is. So really by the time we get to the top, and there's this Japanese like huge statue as you get towards it's where everybody takes their summit picture.
Okay.
Oh my God, there it is. And he was so pissed at me. He would not, it's so sick that he would take the summit picture there.
Oh my goodness.
This is not about me right now. It's about him. And so getting to the top, and he's so happy and he's crying and he's like, he can't even describe.
Wow.
So really me experiencing it through him,
so a little bit of mom kicked in there,
big time,
and then you were overwhelmed because you were seeing it through his eyes, and I think that's interesting.
And you get up there and there wasn't a view that day, so we couldn't see anything, so it wasn't like this, which is the case on a lot of them, but, it's really, I didn't even understand it on Fuji. I understand it very well now that it's not about the summit. It's really the process of getting there. And that's when you're changed. That's when you change as a person, is the process.
How about that? Yeah. Now, do they have, like Everest, I mean, they have their guides and their Sherpas that go up. Does each mountain have their own type of advanced climber that helps the guests through, or the patrons through, whatever you call them? Clients, I guess you would call them. Do they each have their own type of Sherpa, or are you relying on the company that you went through to help you do that?
Yes to all of them, except some of those you can go unsupported, which I was not interested. I mean, when I made the decision, it was really making a decision to do the next one, see how that goes. Then let's get, and then I couldn't even fathom Everest for the first couple of years. I just couldn't. But except Denali. Denali is no support. So you have to carry all of the loads for you and your team, all of your camp gear, all of your food, everything up the mountain.
Why is that?
In a sled behind you. The national park doesn't allow.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah. So it's really the rugged mountaineering, and just so brutally hard and cold, and it took me 2 times, but I got that done, and I had no desire to ever go do that again. That was horrible. I mean, I was carrying 100 pounds of gear up that thing, and everything that goes with that. So, but the other ones have, generally, you don't really have, you have porters on some of them if you want that can get your stuff up to the next camp.
Okay.
But they're all kind of different that way. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about when you're deciding to do these, and we've covered Fuji and Kilimanjaro. Does the mountains have different levels of fear factor to them? You know, are you fearful when you're going up the mountain? And how did you overcome that? How did you stop and say, look, I either have to go down 12,000 feet or I have to go up 8,000 feet or whatever it is? How did you overcome the fear of actually doing it?
By doing it.
Yeah.
It's really trusting the process. So, you know, after Kilimanjaro, the next kind of, because Kilimanjaro, there's no snow, you're not in crampons. It's basically trekking, but it's over 19,000 feet. So, I mean, it's no joke. You need to go slowly and hydrate and do all the things. And, but so the next kind of thing in line was Elbrus in Russia, which thank God I did that, because nobody can get there now. Nobody
didn't know that.
A lot of people are hung up on the 7 because they can't get that one. But so that was the first mountain where I had crampons on my feet. I'm roped, so I had to learn about roping techniques and flipping and what that looks like. And so I was like, okay, this is new, and we'll just. And you're in a line, so you're with a guide, but you're also a team of people,
right?
I was with other people that had also never done that. So I was like, sweet. I don't want to be the most experienced. I don't want to be the most inexperienced. I like to be right in the middle. And it's really the only time in my life in mountaineering that I like to be in the middle, you know, and the rest of my life, I like to be number 1 and win. But
fair enough.
You know, so learned, started learning the real mountaineering techniques and summit night of Elbrus, I'd never gone up steep terrain on a rope with crampons, with a storm and snow in your face and everything that's so cold. And, my legs were cramping up because I had no idea on nutrition and what to eat and what snacks. And, I was dehydrated. I didn't know any of that stuff. And so I was really struggling, and it was super steep. And I mean, you're on this rope on the side and it's super steep.
Yeah.
And and again, it's almost like every time I got to that point where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. There was nothing. I mean, I'm not going to just stop the whole rope team and say, guys, because that would involve them having to deal with me to have somebody put me down. And you can't just go down these things on your own. There's crevasses. There's, and I turn around and I see the red line of the sunrise.
Wow.
And then the sun starts coming up, and you always start at night because it's the coldest and the safest. And then when the sun comes up, you see where you are, and it's like, oh my God, I'm doing this thing. Like, yes, I can do this thing.
Wow.
I'm already almost there. And, that was super, super hard for me, that mountain, because there was so much I had to learn about breathing techniques and rest stepping and, all the things. There's so many things to learn. And got to the summit and got back down. You stay in these barrel huts on the side of the mountain. That it's just the whole thing is so mind blowing. I'm like, I'm in Russia. Like, what? And that was really the point where I was like, okay, I think I can.
I got 3. I can do them all. Huh? Which one do they consider the most difficult? I know that. I know that Everest gets a lot of the press, if you will, and I don't know the difference between press and what's reality, but I know a lot of folks don't make it back from Everest, and there's many different books and many different types of films on Everest, and I did watch a few just to kind of get ready for this interview. But which one did you think, from your perspective, was the most difficult for you, outside of what we're going to talk about, you're being ill?
Well, Elbrus was my second because Fuji is not one of them. But it was Kilimanjaro and then Elbrus. I mean, it's between Denali and Everest. Those are the two points down. And
I gotcha.
For me, because Everest, because I got sick, because I had to get rescued down, and it's 2 months long, and it's oxygen and everything that goes along with that, and seeing dead bodies. So that was hands down, it was the hardest. I think the actual climbing piece, Denali and Everest, I don't know. Everest, that's what I have to say.
Just
It's
call it Everest.
so exposed up there. I mean, get up on the Hillary Step and on the summit ridge. I mean, there's no room for error up there.
Right.
Like it's one side is a knife edge ridge down to Tibet, and the other side is down to Nepal. And like, if you're unclipped from the rope, I mean, it just happened to 2 people this season. They were passing someone, and a cornice fell. A piece of ice fell that they were standing on right at the exact moment, I think, that they were unclipping to get around people, and they're gone. And I mean, so you don't really, I mean, there's,
from my perspective, and, I, until I started doing these interviews and figuring out what, the spirit and the continence of so many people that I interview is overwhelmingly strong. For whatever reason, I think about what you've done going up Everest and all the other things you did before that, and I think how do you get to a point where that's even a reasonable option? For me, I just don't think I could do that. And I was an athlete, and I was a hunter and all of this other stuff, but the human spirit is capable of so much. It's just surprising to me that you could call upon that human spirit so many times. I mean, in my eyes, you have a special makeup as a person. These people that climb all these mountains all the time, it's just something that's built in. And so I'm curious, and I want to kind of segue a little bit into what happened on Everest. You went up Everest, you got to I guess it was the base camp 2, if I'm not mistaken, but you got sick, you got ill. Tell me about that. Tell me about what happened, and let's dig into that just a little bit.
Yeah. So it's pretty common. It's not really when you go on Everest. It's not if you're going to get sick, it's when. I mean, you're trekking through the Everest base camp region to get to base camp, and you're staying at tea houses, and you're around a lot of people, and different food and different all the stuff, and a lot of people are sick. And so I started getting sick in Farache, which was probably about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 days into the trek. So you fly into Kathmandu, and then you take a helicopter into Labuschagne, which is where you start trekking. And
side note, I hear that airplane ride into Kathmandu is quite a little trip there.
Yeah, most dangerous airport in the world. So it's into this cliff with this shortest runway in the world. And like, talk about no room for air. I mean, oh man, it's super. I loved it. I just
okay.
Well, I did the Everest Base Camp trek in 2018.
Okay.
So I had gone through that whole process of trekking in, and we hiked to Everest Base Camp, and so I saw Everest for the first time, and this emotion came, and at that point I had only done 3 of them, 2 or 3 of them. I was still like, I don't know about Everest. That's and I see Everest and I start crying. Like, I'm crying overlooking this mountain. Like, it was very emotional, very spiritual. And that's when I knew, when I'm sitting there, I'm at base camp looking up at it, and I'm like, I got to do this. I've got to go up her. And, but anyway, so fast forward to 2023, and I'm over there again. So there was a lot of familiarity with that part. And I start with this cough, and everybody around me, more intense at this point, and everybody got it. And so you're trying to figure out, which over-the-counter meds to take. And is this just the Kumbu cough? Because as you get higher in altitude and the cold, and everybody's coughing. And it's hard to know if you're sick or if it's just the Kumbu cough and this is just, you're okay.
Part of the experience, yeah.
I was feeling really bad and taking some stuff. And we took a couple extra rest days at one of the tea houses for me. So I could sleep.
And is this before you got to base camp when you started really getting? Okay.
Yeah, it was all on the way to base camp.
Okay.
And I climbed La Vache Peak, which is one of the rotations that climbing the Seven Summits uses that peak instead of doing 3 rotations up Everest, which means 6 times through the Khumbu ice wall, which is super dangerous.
Yeah.
So La Vache Peak is their first rotation. And so it was really important. Without it, you climb high, sleep low. That's how your blood cells get used to the altitude, so that it can higher and higher.
Gotcha.
So, even though I was sick, I was with Tendi, who's this whole journey has been for me. Okay, who is the best person for me? My coach, nutritionist, Sherpa, guide, and I sought them out. And I signed up with Tendi 2 years before Everest because he's that difficult to get in with.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely perfect for me. But so we summited La Vache. I managed to summit. I was feeling crappy, but I managed to summit. Just kept thinking it's going to get better, and got to base camp. And you go through this beautiful puja ceremony where you take all your gear up to this altar, and it's blessed, and these llamas come in, and I mean, just absolutely mind blowing. So cool.
Yeah.
And then Tendi and I start up on our first rotation, and we get up through the Khumbu ice fall, and I'm coughing like crazy. And we get up, and it's like 5 hours if you're doing well to get up to Camp 1.
Okay.
Crossing the ladders, the whole thing. And we were about 3/4 of the way there, and my coughing turned. Tendi was in front of me, and he turned around, because in my mind I was like, look, I can just get to Camp 1 and then I can pour down, I can something, but I'm not going back through that thing right now in my mind. I can, because I know it all. And Tendi turns around and he's like, we're going back. And I'm like, so it's getting really bad, and now I can barely walk without coughing. I'm coughing up blood. They call down to base camp, and they have oxygen brought up to me so that I can get back down to base camp on oxygen. And so it was scary, but I wasn't. I never thought that the whole trip would get derailed. It's weird. I just was like, okay, what's the next thing? I need to get on oxygen. I need to get down. And then I go down, because I had already seen there's a medical Everest base camp doctors that are there, and I'd already gone to see them. They cleared me. They're like, no, it's just Khumbu cough. You're fine.
Wow.
Keep going. So I was like, okay, sweet. And then I get back down, and I'm just in really bad shape. And they get to my tent, because I can no longer even walk to their tent.
Wow.
And they're like, we need to get you to the hospital right away. And I'm on oxygen in my tent, and then the weather closes in, so they can't come get me. So I'm just in the tent. The rest of my team is now going up to summit, and I'm going down.
Do you remember what you were thinking about during that period of time where you're in your tent, that your teammates you're headed up the, what were you thinking? Do you remember what you were thinking? I got to get out of here. I got to get better and get up there. What was your thoughts there?
It was all about, tell me what I need to do to get down and back up. Wow. And Mike, the owner, my camel, came to my tent. I'll never forget this. And he's like, look, because I was upset. I'm crying. I'm like, I've put everything. I've worked for 5 years to get on this thing.
Yeah.
Put everything on the line. And
I'm smiling because I read this and I was like, that's kind of funny.
He said to me, this happened to me, and I was able to get down to the hospital and still summit. You have enough time, because it was I left home March 30th. This all happened April, like the third week in April or something. And I'm like, okay, Mike. And I hung on to that the entire time. The entire time I was down in Kathmandu and in the hospital and all of that. I'm like, all I needed was one person to say that it had happened to them and they still got back, because nobody was telling me, oh, think about going home. I wasn't in my head. People
Julie,
at home.
I have to tell you, this is not a reasonable answer to my question. The whole time I'm thinking about this question, I'm thinking, I don't know how in the world. I've told people that I was going to have you on. I was like, how in the world does somebody go to Everest, get sick, go into the hospital for 9 days, and decide, yep, I'm going to go back up there and I'm going to summit? And you're telling me that was always the case. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I was only in the hospital for 2 days. So
2 days. I apologize. I read it wrong.
That's okay. But I mean, by the time I got there, I had full-blown pulmonary edema. So my lungs were starting to fill with fluid and really bad lung infection. And I'm talking to every doctor there and about going back up. And they're coming in every, 4 hours, and it's different doctors each time. And I feel like I'm giving this sales pitch, and I'm texting my doctor at home, like, can we get a pulmonary doctor involved to look at the x-rays? So we had x-rays sent home here to get a second opinion, because I wasn't going to go back up without clearance. I'm not going to do, the timing company wouldn't have let me anyway.
Sure.
I was sure as hell going to push as far as I could to try. And, the doctor kept saying, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. It's not really getting better, but you don't need to stay in the hospital. You need to check out, go. And I said, all right, what can I do? Cause I'm not going home. They said, you can check into a hotel, eat, drink. Cause I had lost a bunch of weight by then, which is normal. I was super weak. Eat, rest, sleep, and come back in here every day, and we'll take new x-rays and see. So I would go back in there every day or every other day, whatever it was. And he's like, nope, still bad. Still no way. And then we get to day 7, and I'm looking at this. He's like, look, I'll clear you to go back, but there's a 60% chance that this infection is going to come right back. That's usually what happens in this scenario is people go back and it comes right back. And I looked right at him and I said, but there's a 40% chance it won't. And he was like, I think then he realized I was like, crazy or serious. Like,
I don't have a pushover on my hands. I should have said 75.
I was looking for an out, and I could have. It would have been so easy. I had some reason. I was sick. I could try another year, and So then in the 7-day period was really important, because at 7 days I had spent a month acclimatizing at that point, right?
Yeah.
So when
you don't want to lose that once you come down, right?
When you pass day 7 is when you start to lose that. And
see.
We're like really watching this timeline, and I know about day 7, and and then we get to like day 8, I get cleared, and they're like, okay, maybe we can fly you back to base camp at this point. And then the weather closes in, the helicopters can't get me. I'm like, what else? Like, I really was fed up with, I just felt like
I'm sure
there were so many obstacles. I couldn't understand why so many obstacles. And so eventually the weather clears, like, think the day or 2 later, and I can't fly if I would have flown up to base camp, I would have immediately gotten sick, like immediately. So then we have to fly back up to Faraday, which was interesting, because it was the same tea house that I started to get sick in a month earlier, back at this place. And Tendy flies down and he meets me there, and we go on these day acclimatization hikes for 2 days. And I'm feeling amazing, because I just ate pizza and French fries and whatever I wanted, just as many calories as I could get in myself for that period of time. And I was super rested. And so I felt great. And so we ended up flying from Paris back up to base camp, and then went on the first rotation. And before we left, Mike, the owner, Mike Hamill, calls me out of the dining tent. Tendy and I are supposed to leave the next morning for our, second rotation, but first rotation up to camp 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, Tendy has the same thing you had. We got to fly. And I'm like, this is my God. Like, he and I have been glued together this entire time. I had 100% faith and confidence in him. We have this unbelievable spiritual bond going. Like, he's a Buddhist, like, just incredible.
Yeah.
And he never gets sick. Like, the Sherpa people are so used to that. They generally don't get sick. And so I'm like, oh, I have another, like, well, I did have a breakdown, and my coach happened to be on that expedition, and I go find him in his tent, and I'm losing my, like, what else? And they're putting me with this guy Pemba, and I don't know who he is. It turned out he's like the next Tendy. Like, everybody's trying to get this guy. So he's like perfect, And so we go up, and it takes me. We get to camp 1, and then we get to camp 2, and then Tendy. All of a sudden, Tendy's back, and everything's fine. So, just there's a lot of obstacles for sure.
So from the day that you went into the hospital, didn't you tell me, and again, I read this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it like 9 days later you summited? I mean, it was.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to get from base camp to summit, generally speaking?
You're at camp 1 for a night, camp 2 for a night, camp 3 for a night, and then you go from camp 3 to camp 4, and you're not. It's really one big push from camp 3. There's not really sleep after that point. You get to 4, and another day has gone by, but you're not sleeping.
I gotcha.
Night to summit. So
tell me about that night. Tell me about the night before you summit, how you feel, what you're thinking, and what's going through your mind.
This episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness is brought to you by Terry Barr, Distinctive Real Estate, advising families across Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia for over 15 years. Visit the website at terrybarrealestate.com.
We get to camp 4, and camp 3 to camp 4, it's all so incredibly difficult, but it's really, I underestimated how difficult camp 3 to camp 4 was, how exhausted I would be when I got to 4, even though I was on oxygen. So then our final summit push, you go on oxygen from camp 2. And we get the tent all set up, and initially Tendy's, we get there, it's like 2 or 1 or something, and Tendy's like, the plan was to leave in a couple hours, and for the summer, or leave at like, I think 8. I thought I had like 5 or 6 hours of rest. And then it starts snowing. So I'm just in camp. I'm in this tent on oxygen, like at camp 4. It's like the moon. Like, and you see all the trash, and that was, there's a dead body up there, which was a really, Tammy had to say to me at one point, like, you have to block that out.
It's prepare yourself.
Yeah. It's not going to happen to you. Like, you are good. We are safe. Everything's okay. And it starts snowing, like, horribly. It's snowing and snowing and snowing at Camp 4, which Tenny's like, I've never had it snow up here. And so it's snowing, and I'm thinking, there's no way we're going tonight. Like, I'm going to get another night for sure and be rested. And so it's like 10 o'clock, and of course, he's radioing down. These guys have all these things to check the weather, and and it's like 10 o'clock, and he's like, we're leaving in a half hour. I'm like,
oh my goodness,
we're going out in this storm? What? I don't question him. I mean, but in my mind, I'm like, whoa. And so it was then I kept taking my oxygen mask off, like, to do things, to eat, I mean, you can still, it's not like you're going to keel over when you take off the oxygen. But I had it off my face too much. And, Tenny kept saying, put it back on. And all of a sudden there's all these things to do, right? You've got to heated socks and get those things figured out. And you've got to get all the right layers on and all the things. And it was taking me forever. And that's when I look back now, I realized that's why it's the death zone, because that's why nobody should be making their own decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
All included. So it was kind of a mad rush to get all the things and get ready and get on the rope and go. And I didn't have time to be scared. You know, it was just get on the rope and go. And it's snowing and you can't see anything and it's pitch black and all you see is a line of people with headlamps.
Yeah.
You know, that first section up to the balcony just goes forever. And they kept saying, wait till we get to the balcony, which is like the only kind of flat spot on summit night where people break and eat and change oxygen and do whatever they need to do. It's the kind of the only place to do it. And so finally, after hours and hours and hours on that rope, and we're passing people. So I felt super good about that. And he taught me how to do that. And I was roped to him still. And I'm like, okay, if I'm passing people, I'm okay. I'm doing okay, you know? So we finally get to the balcony, and I there's nothing to eat or drink during this. And I had this whole like summit night snack bag all packed, and I showed it to Teddy at Camp 4, and he was like, yeah, how can I? No. He's like, give me your whatever you have that has caffeine, gummy, give that to me. And so he held that's all I had the whole time was gummies, caffeinated gummies. And we get to the balcony, and it is blinding snowstorm, wind. There was no way we were taking a break to do anything. You couldn't even see. Yeah. And so these guys changed my oxygen, and then we just kept going. And it was, you know, it's super emotional. My mom had died shortly before I left. And one of the last things she said to me was, I said, where do you want me to put your ashes? And she said, you put them up on top of that mountain, because she was a huge supporter. And I was really struggling when she was in the hospital, and I'm still training. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like, am I doing the right thing? And it kept telling me I was. And so I've got her ashes in my backpack, and it was me and Tendi and the Sherpa team, and there wasn't anybody else around us. I looked down at my Garmin, which is the little satellite thing. So I knew everybody at home's tracking this little dot and watching. And it's frozen. So no communication. Nobody at home knew anything. Wow. Tendi hadn't had communication with base camp at that point. And I was like, Tendi, my Garmin, and he's like, and base camp doesn't know. And he's like, I know where we are. We're okay. So it was and then I calmed down again, and I was like, okay, we got this. We're just walking, you know, we're just walking. And there's these lightning storms that happen at this altitude. And it was probably, good Lord, we're up at 27,000 feet at that point. I mean, and the whole sky, it's just it's the most surreal, beautiful thing I've ever seen. And and then you know, we're on the South Summit, which is it's so steep. I mean, it's so crazy. And the sun I look over and I see this flash, and the sky is red, and then it's orange, and then it's blue, and it's yellow, and it went on forever. Like Danny, look. He's like, yeah, I know. Like he's been up there 15 times. Like it's like, I didn't even look. And that just gives you the energy and the bravery and whatever else you need to keep going. Because at that point, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to stand on top of this thing. Like it's happening. Yeah.
That is truly amazing. I mean, I've read a few books before I even started doing this podcast about Everest, because it's such a fascinating journey, and it's a fascinating idea of going somewhere that no human really should be going. And yet we've turned it into this amazing feat where we get to see what's on top of the world, so to speak. And I guess one of the funny questions I had for you is, like, you have pictures of yourself up there. Is that something that Tendi did for you? Did he use your camera to take pictures, or how did you get some of the pictures that I've seen up there? I think it was a video of you spreading your mom's ashes, and then pictures of being up on top. And, you know, I'm a photographer at heart, so I'm like, if I was up there, I'd want to stay up there for 30 minutes and just take every picture I can imagine. But how was that?
Well, it's there's a line to get on top, first of all, and there's people behind you waiting to get on top. So I was conscious of that. And
Sure.
But it's a postage stamp. I mean, the summit is tiny. So, I mean, we're heading up, and you can see it, and you can see the people and the prayer flags and the whole thing, and we get up there, and they were taking the Sherpa and Tendi were taking video and photos. I couldn't even deal with.
Yeah, I could imagine.
I mean, I pulled my phone out at one point because I took the video of myself.
Yeah,
I think that's the only video that I took, and the very first thing was, because I had the banner and there's everything for the Miracle Foundation that I wanted to get.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, number one thing was my mom's ashes. So Tenny got me into a little area at the summit, facing Tibet, and everybody else was kind of the other way. And I was able to sit down and do that. And that was, it felt like a half an hour, but it was only, a minute or two. And then
it must have been a special moment for you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many people get to do that? And I felt her with me though, the whole time. I really, I felt like she was helping to pull me up that mountain. And it's really hard to describe other than just, I knew everything was going to be okay. I knew it. She was up there. I knew she was watching me. I knew she was with me through the storms, through all the things, it was her, I believe, that got me up there. And so, that moment of releasing her ashes just super, super special. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's astounding for those folks that are listening that don't know. I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion that people that go on this hike, we'll call it a hike, but people that climb this mountain get to the top. Most people don't, quite frankly. And so to have a perfect, call it a perfect storm, that's probably a bad analogy, but, everything comes together and you make it to the summit. I think I read recently that there's over 200 bodies on the mountain because they can't get them off, and they're mapped out on the mountain. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. And that's why this story is so incredible. So you get up there, you spread mom's ashes, you take a look around. What was your emotions in that moment? That seems like
just going right from the ashes to the banner and making sure I had all those photos and the group photos and all of that. And then all of a sudden Tenny's like, we got to go. And I'm like, what do you mean? We just got here. Like, I could have stayed there forever, but you're limited on oxygen. There's people waiting. So you gotta, and so I'm fussing with my stuff, getting my pack back on or whatever. And Tenny comes over to me. I'll never forget this. And he's like, hold still. He gets behind me and he starts turning me around in a circle really slowly in his calm, Buddha like voice. He's like, I just want you to take this in. Look where you are right now. And that was the moment that it hit me where I was. Before that, it was like, gotta do this. There's people waiting. There's, wasn't real serene and all this stuff. But when he did that, it was like this incredible feeling of accomplishment and pride and relief, really. Like, I don't have to do it again.
What a gift, though. That must have been a heck of a gift.
It was the greatest gift he could have ever given me, other than getting me there. I mean,
incredible.
It's in my mind forever. I didn't need to have my phone. I didn't need a video of it. It's burned into my brain forever. And the gratitude of that mountain allowed me passage to the summit. And I believed that. I mean, it's not about conquering anything. Yeah. It's doing everything I can and pushing as hard as I can on my end. And I showed up as ready as you could be on that expedition. And then it's really up to the mountain. Like, do I get up there or not? And there's a lot of assholes, climbers that are over there. There's a lot of ones too, but there's a lot of egos and it's very male dominated. And it was, I was supposed to stand on top. I just was. And I'm still trying to unpack all of it over a year later.
Yeah. And the other thing that struck me is when you started this journey to do the 7 summits, if I'm correct, you did all of them in 5 years. Is that
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's incredible. It comes at certainly a physical cost, a mental cost, and an actual cost. But to do that in 5 years is pretty astounding for somebody that really didn't start out to be a mountaineer and didn't start out to be a climber necessarily. And this accomplishment is just mind-boggling to me. So you get turned around. Tendy says, we need to go. There's people waiting, and you want to get down, and that's a process in itself, a dangerous process in itself. Do you go back down the same rope and you pass people on the same rope, or is there a parallel rope that you go down or is it the exact same trail?
Same rope, same trail. So you got people coming up and you're going down, and it is really sketchy, especially on the Hillary step, because you got 2 feet that you're standing on, and the same people are going up and down on the same rope. And so, I just did whatever Tendy told me to do. Wherever he told me to go, I did and listened. And you don't look down, you're just looking at the rope in your hands and what you need to do.
And that's Everest is what, over 29,000 feet. I don't know the exact number, but you're standing on the very top, looking down 29,000 feet. I'm going to do what I'm told to.
Yes. I got to because Tenny kept saying to me the whole, especially summit, the whole final rotation, the summit is not the summit. The summit is, the true summit is when I get you home to your family. That's the truth.
What a truth.
He believes that with every ounce of his being, and every decision that he made was around getting me back to Bobby and the kids, so super aware of everybody else that's on the mountain, the weather, everything that you can't. The Sherpa are the reason people get up this mountain. I mean, they do everything. You can't get up there safely and back down without them. I mean, you just and they're so kind, and all they want to do is help you. And I, coming off of Denali, especially where you're self-supporting, carrying all your stuff, like you got it. And then you have to get used to like allowing them to do all the things for you, because it's in their nature. That's what they want to do. Yeah.
Those guys all of those guys are, the stories I've read about them are unbelievable, what they do and how they go back out when people can't move and they're sick, and they go back up the mountain to help, and all of those things. And the more you read, you've been there, the more I read about it, though, the more I think, well, you don't want to go back up there. I mean, that person's not going to make it. And yet they go back into the storm, and they go back and they help, and they sound like a wonderful people. I've never met anybody that's a Sherpa, but they sound like an absolute wonderful people.
Yeah, it's humbling. And I mean, to rescue anybody up that high, it's so difficult and dangerous. And if somebody's gone, because I didn't really how are there 200 bodies up there? Like, why don't you just get, well, you have 48 hours till they freeze, and then it's almost impossible because it's so heavy. And then it takes a whole team of people and a sled and all this stuff, and on severe, exposed things. And but I know if we had, I can absolutely in my heart know that if we had run into somebody in trouble, we would have stopped everything to help that person.
Yeah.
I would have, absolutely. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
We weren't in that situation. Anybody that we came across that needed help there was already people there or whatever. So, it's really about the Sherpa and the people, and they make you want to be better versions of yourself is all I can say, because I just have never experienced anyone that is that kind. And
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So you got back down. We don't have to take the trip down with you. Everything you got through, I guess you got feeling better on the way down. How long did it take from the summit to get back to, I guess base camp? Is that fairly quickly, or does that take a couple days, 3 days?
2 days it took. Yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
went back down to Camp 4 and decided to stay that night, which was the big decision to make. We had enough oxygen to do that. So that's, that it was good because I felt a lot better going down the next day.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then it's a day down, basically. It's incredible. It takes you 2 months to get to the top of that thing and a day to get down.
Incredible stuff. Yeah. Well, let's fast forward. You do Everest. It's such a terrific story. There's lots of things you can pull from that. The harrowing story of getting sick, your spirit and the desire to go back up there, your Sherpa and all that he meant to you and means to you. You get back down, you get to your family. And the thing that I thought was pretty darn cool is that the seventh and final was in Australia, I guess. And it appears like your whole family did that with you. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing. You're a family woman. I could see it in all your posts and the things that you talk about and the trips that you take with your family. I thought, what a better way to thank your support system than to say, hey, let's take that last step together. How was that for you?
I mean, amazing. We decided there's 2 versions of the 7 summits, and the 7th summit is either Kosciuszko in Australia or Karsten's Pyramid in Indonesia. And there's 2 lists, and it has to do with the shelf and the plate and where the continent is in the ocean. And anyway, you can do either one, but they're very different. Kosciuszko is just a day hike up a hill. Yeah. And Karsten's Pyramid is like serious major exposure. and I was signed up 2 or 3 times for Karsten's, and it's been closed since before COVID, and super dangerous, and people getting kidnapped over there. And
oh boy.
So as we were getting closer to Everest, I sat everybody down and said, what do you think about going to Australia? Because I really wanted to do this in 5 years.
Sure.
And we could go there for New Year's, and all we have to do is just, drive a little bit out of Sydney. And I mean, I minimized it a little bit, but
drive a little bit.
I mean, they can do it. And so, we started up, and I mean, such troopers. Both the kids were sick, and and Bobby it was a beautiful experience standing up there together and finishing it with them. They sacrificed so much. I was gone a lot. I missed a lot, the training, unbelievable amount of time, the training and the trips that I had to take just up to the Whites in New Hampshire, out to Bishop, California with my coach, and, just constantly grinding at training and being exhausted. And they supported me, and a lot of families wouldn't,
Yeah.
I mean, never said no, or, never made me feel guilty. The kids never made me feel. They were super on board with the whole thing. So to finish it with them, I mean, beautiful.
What a beautiful moment. I saw that when you did it. Of course, I think I reached out to you before you did the 7th. And you said, I'm getting ready for the 7th. We'll get together after the fact. So I was able to watch kind of the post and the journey along the way. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful, and I didn't know how tall that mountain was, but I thought, what a wonderful way for the family to end this 5-year, this 5-year journey with mom and all she's been through. And I just think there's so much about your story that could mean a lot to a lot of people. I'm so thankful that you're willing to share some of the more intimate details. Those are difficult, and that doesn't mean they didn't happen, but it also helps, it helps other people in their journey of things in their lives that perhaps happened. And I wonder how many will become mountain climbers, because that's the extreme, that's the extreme response to hardship, I guess. But it's been a wonderful time watching. Couple more questions, I guess. I want to hit on your business a little bit. You're somewhat of a philanthropist, and you've done that through A Miracle Ear. Tell the audience a little bit about how you connected Miracle Air and the foundation there, and what that's all about. How you connected that with your mountaineering.
Yeah, so Miracle Ear has an arm, which is called the Miracle Ear Foundation, and we give free hearing aids to adults and children who can't afford hearing help. And it has been a part of my life since, I came into the business in 1993, and I joined the board years ago. And so when I got ready to do Kilimanjaro, I thought, because obviously it's nonprofit and it costs money to run the thing, and so fundraising is a big piece of it. And I'd never really done that. And so I thought, well, what if I could raise some money for Kilimanjaro? I wonder if anybody would give me any money towards the foundation.
Right.
With this tagline, Summit for Sound, and like 50 grand comes in. I was like, what? Like, people are incredible.
Yeah.
And I kept going with it. I kept going with Summit for Sound 1, 2, 3, until we got to Everest.
Yeah.
And over $225,000 was raised through the climbs, which helps hundreds of people across Pennsylvania who otherwise would not be able to hear. And so I'm still on the board, and it was a beautiful marriage, and a way to give back and think about all the people who are so much less fortunate than me.
Yeah.
And that I'm doing some good for them in the process.
Yeah. Incredible. Just incredible. I thought that was amazing. So the last two questions I have for you, based upon your life, based upon everything that you've gone through, and all your responses and reaction to those, what do you feel like is your greatest accomplishment as Julie McKelvey?
It's hard to answer. I mean, my kids. I really mean that.
Yeah, I know.
Aside from my kids, I think, coming from where I came from and being able to build the life that we get to live today, it's, I just never thought it was possible for someone like me. And I'm not the most educated person, I'm not the smartest person. I have this thing in me that won't quit. And I have this thing in me that just says yes. So, I mean, my greatest accomplishment is probably getting sober, because without that, I wouldn't have anything else,
Mm-hmm.
It's, and I get to live these experiences, and I wasn't going to retire for 5 or 10 more years, Terry. Like, the business was at its peak. Like, and I got the nudge on Everest that I'm supposed to sell my business. And it was on that same, past the balcony, and the Garmin's not working. And I got and I didn't hear it, but I felt this. I need to stop working. And I'm like, what? And as soon as I got home, I started figuring out how I was going to do that. And I don't know. It's acting in blind faith, I guess, when you get a nudge to pay attention to it and to say yes in spite of fear. It's overcoming the fear again and again. And I still have fear today. People don't believe that, but it's true. And I don't want to get to the end of my life, whenever that is, and regret anything, nothing. And so kind of all the decisions that I make are around that, like, what am I called to do? Why am I here?
That's the question. That's the question for everybody. What's my purpose? What am I called to do? Yeah. And I think it's the people like yourself that get that nudge and listen to that nudge that says, am I fulfilling my purpose where I'm at? Are there other things I need to be doing or looking to? I like your answer, because I don't think a lot of people I think a lot of people get the nudge, they miss it, they don't hear it, they don't feel it, and they never make the choice to make a change because it is scary. And
Yeah, I mean, I didn't set out to inspire anybody with this. I really didn't. I just like, I got this crazy goal, and wouldn't it be cool if if I could do it,
yeah,
with like less than, I think it's 70 women have done it, and 500 women in the world have stood on the top of Everest, or whatever it is. So it just started out as, what if I could?
amazing.
And along the way, I'm out on my long sessions, and I have to be on the mountain for 5, 6, 7 hours. And I'll do a post in my car, like whining about what I have to do, because that just helps me stay accountable. And then I'm up there and I'm getting these messages like, I got off the couch because of you today. And I'm like, what? Like, what? How cool is it, So it's in it, whatever capacity that we are drawn to help other people. I think that's what we need to lean into. And that looks different for everybody, but there's always a way to do that, because I know for sure when I am over here helping someone in whatever it looks like, God's over here taking care of my fancy problems, and they're fancy today. Thank God.
Yeah. So that's a very well thought out answer. I have one more question that may test you a little bit. I put it into my answers for everyone. Given the fact that you've gone through so much in your life, and some good, some terrible, lots of challenges, lots of things you've gone through, if you had, and you made a mention of it earlier, that you have a heart for single moms and women especially, and I think that's wonderful, because you've got something for them to listen to think about. If you had the attention of the world for 5 minutes, what advice would you give those women, those single moms, and even people like myself? If you had the attention, what advice would you give them?
I think it's find a way. I didn't start the 7 Summits till I was 50. I see so many women who set aside their own dreams, their own desires, because I have, a family, or because the list is endless.
Sure.
I can tell you, I'm not a single mom.
Yeah.
I can tell you for sure, but I am, was a business owner, and I'm 70 to 80 hours a week. I didn't stop. I didn't stop. And I still was able to do this. And I had to pivot. I had to find ways. I had to lean on people to help and ask for help. But if you feel that you are being called to do something, or if everybody has that thing in their life that they wish they could go do.
Right.
Everybody has something.
Yeah.
And what I say to that is, go do it, and don't stop finding a way until you do it. Because there will be barriers, and there will be roadblocks, and there will be things that you feel like, oh, I can't. Yes, you can. You just keep saying yes to the next thing. Because that nudge, that urge, that feeling, that dream, I believe, is given to you for a reason. And it's for you to go do it, because it'll change your life. And in the process, maybe you'll change other people's lives. Me going into the mountains, finally, I was forced to delegate in my company. It was the only way I could do it. And prior to that, I had my hands in every single thing all the time.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm removed, and I can't get my hands in, and I had to lean on them. And it turns out they're rocking.
Yeah.
They're awesome. And so it was just one, and I didn't start climbing the mountains to learn any of those things.
Yeah.
But that's what happened in the process. And at the end of it, I'm a different person than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
and do in a way that is so fulfilling internally. Not about hitting the top, not about fulfilling internally,
Yeah.
It's amazing, beautiful.
Well, let me ask you a second question, B part, because we started out with a lot of your struggles. We started out with your addiction, with your, some things that happened to you as a young woman, and keeping that in context. The people that are struggling right now with addiction, or they're struggling right now because something happened to them, or they've had a bad card dealt or something like that. What advice can you give them based upon your past and how you overcame? What advice could you give those types of people that may be listening to this?
Just believe, and don't listen to the BS excuses that your mind will tell yourself about why you're different, because you're not. We all have the same opportunity to overcome obstacles. The circumstances and the details look different for everybody, but don't use them as an excuse, because it's the same thing. And I have walked women through the darkest things in their lives, and I get to now walk this path with them. I mean, it's believe in something greater than yourself, because we can't do it alone. It's leaning on others and leaning on something greater than myself to get me through that. And through the hard things, have the courage of your convictions. That's one of my favorite really things to say. Like, if I really believe in this and I want to turn my life around, then there is a way.
Yeah.
And the way is not easy. And that's what I think a lot of people want, this easy. No, it's not supposed to be easy. Easy isn't where you grow.
That's true.
So
I think that's wonderful. I read a book, or I'm actually in the process of reading it. I shouldn't say I've read it, because I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. You should write that down. I think you would really relate to it. But it talks about those things. You grow in the hard things in life, and the real hard things in life. And we can do so much more than we think we can. Even biblical truths, you learn from, you're refined by the fire. And that really means that the things that you go through are the things that you learn from. And I am blessed to have you on my show. I'm also inspired by you, whether you want to be an inspiration or not. I'm inspired by you. I didn't know all of your details, but the more that I didn't know, the more I'm inspired. And I truly hope that whatever path you take is one of others, helping others and continuing to walk along the side of those folks that you talked about. Yeah. And I really want to thank you for being on the show. And it took us a while, but I'm so thankful that we waited, because I think all of the distractions are, done, and we could sit down and have a conversation. And I think I think you've accomplished some wonderful things. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy, really.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.